we ready, Luke?
We're ready.
Are we ready to go back?
All the way.
All the way back.
All the way back.
Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Blurry Creatures. Andrew Jones, fellow 916 defecto.
Yeah.
And grew up in Sacramento, for those that don't know what 916 means. You're the lead researcher behind the NOAA's Ark scans, and we're excited to go back in time and talk about this might be the possible resting site of Noah's Ark out in Turkey near Mount Ararat. Welcome to the podcast. I know you've been doing some investigations of the Durupinar Formation, which is like a lot of people have sent us these pictures over the years. It looks like a big boat. It looks like a big something in the ground. And we're going to talk about that today. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on. And I would love to get into this story and learn more about this formation.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'd like to, share whatever you guys want to know about the site and explain, what we have found and what we want to do in the future at the site. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
I guess you can give us some basics. Why this is. There's a lot of skepticism on both sides. If this is like actually just a natural formation, or this is actually like some sort of petrified ancient boat, or a shape of a boat, or something interesting. So I guess you could just give us the bare bones, and then we can kind of ask some more in-depth questions.
Sure. So the site itself, those who know about it can ignore this part, but it was discovered in 1959 on September 11. Interesting date.
Yeah.
But it was kept in Durupinar, where the site is named after him. And he was the one who discovered it. He was a cartographer with the Turkish military. So in 1959, Turkey joined NATO. And so they were mapping out their country, especially these eastern areas, which at the time bordered the Soviet Union. And so they had high-flying, aircraft taking these aerial photography photographs. And he was making the maps of these photographs. And so he noticed in one of them, this boat-shaped object, basically like popping out of the ground at him. And so within a week, it hit the news. It was in Turkish press. And then by October of that year, the next month, the actual photographs were released by the Turkish military. And American and worldwide press actually picked up the story and published these, the black and white photographs. Now, these were high altitude photos that were published. And so people wanted to go see the site. So an American group went out there in June of 1960 to investigate the site and see what was there. They actually hooked up with the Turkish military and Captain Durupinar. And the report from that first expedition on the ground was published in Life magazine and in Wyatt magazine in Turkey, which was the same name, Life. And so they showed this boat formation in this mud flow. All around it was this rough terrain. And right there where this boat was, you just had this nice semi-flat, smooth terrain, which is grass growing on it, but in the shape of a boat. And then when they measured it, it turned out to be exactly 300 cubits long, mentioned in the Bible as the length for Noah's Ark, and it was a boat shape. So that got some, people excited. But at the time, because they had no way to excavate, they were just on the ground, walking around. They basically left with no other plans to investigate. So the site kind of left the news. But in 1961, the Turkish military hired Ara Güler, who was a famous photographer in Turkey, and he went. They put him on a small plane, and he flew at a low altitude over the site and took a lot of photographs from different angles. And in those, you can clearly see this perfectly preserved boat shape. And so this, again, the site was kind of forgotten about, and then it started in the late 1970s, and throughout the 80s and into the 90s, an American explorer, Ron Wyatt, went out there and was doing work, and he basically got the site back in the news, and it got everyone excited about it. But he passed away in '99, and then the site again kind of this got left in the archives of the news. So my first trip out here was because of Ron. And I heard about him. I was as a kid in middle school in Sacramento. And that's how I got involved, because he came out and did some meetings in the Sacramento area in, I think it was 1990, but it might have been 91. And then I called him up on the phone. I tried talking to him, This was before the internet, and so I was making these long distance phone calls to Tennessee, trying to figure out. I asked them a ton of questions. I remember. And then my parents saw the phone bill the next month and want to know who I was calling. This is before unlimited minutes and all that.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, this is the guy who said he found Noah's Ark. No, so technically Durupinar found it, but Ron was very instrumental in getting it into the press back in the 80s. And so by 1987, the Turkish government actually declared it a national park for the geological, for the shape. No excavation's ever been done, but they believe that it should be preserved so that the local farmers don't plow it up or, before something could be done. So they built a visitor center over the site in 87 and made it this national park. And then by 97, 10 years later, that was my first trip out to the site. And that started basically me going back and forth many times since then. And then by 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was actually already in Turkey in February that year. And I was about to go to Saudi Arabia for a tour down there, and all the borders closed. So I obviously canceled the tour, but I was here in Turkey, and my friend here said, why don't you stay here? We can work with the locals, make connections with the government officials and the archaeologists, and try to do work here on the site. Yeah, so that's when I started. They said, okay, yeah, might as well stay here. It's cheaper to live here than California. And so that's how I got to be over here versus going back home.
Didn't you have to just dial, was it 9 to dial for a long distance? I'm trying to remember back in the day.
Yeah.
Or one?
Well, I remember I had to, I dialed 411 to get the operator first, and they gave me Ron's phone number. He was actually in the directory. I had bought his book, and it said, I mentioned his name and P.O. box in the front. So I just called 411. I said, can you find a phone number for Ronald Wyatt in Madison, Tennessee? And the lady said yes, and you want me to connect you? I said, oh, okay, sure.
Wait, how old are you at this time, Andrew? Are you like a?
This was early teens, so I was in a 7th grade. So whatever, 13, 14.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I would talk to him for hours. So after that, I don't know if I'm sure I annoyed him, but I would call back, and then he was willing to talk for a couple hours at a time. And finally, he came out to Sacramento in 95 and 96. I invited him and some friends, and I paid for his ticket. And he did a series of meetings and lectures in Northern California, and one of them was in the site we set up in Sacramento. One was in Woodside. Another place was downtown Sacramento area. We had a church that had rented a theater, and so he gave his lectures there, showed his video clips, and then the very next year in 97, I was in college, and a friend of mine from Florida, he said, hey, I need a travel companion. He was with Ron on the tour in 91, but because this area was very unstable politically, that the Turkish military turned the bus full of Americans around and said, you can't drive out there. And so my friend was on that tour, and he was denied, going out to see the Ark. So he said, hey, let's go see Noah's Ark. This was 97. And he said, but don't tell Ron. He said, he's going to try to talk us out of it. No. And so I decided right before the trip to call Ron and tell him that we're going. And it was good. Ron, but the first time I said it, Ron said, you tell Bill to call me right now. But then I talked to Bill later, Bill Fry, who the guy I was traveling with, and he said, well, Ron was upset at first, but now we're going to be taking some posters and giving some money to a local guy there who watches over the site. So it turned out we were able to put some posters up in this visitor center building that was just 10 years before built. But when I got out here, it was like kind of, you felt like the Wild West, like no tourist. This is even the mid 90s. The tourism wasn't really a thing out here. I remember Ron gave us a piece of advice. He said, when you leave the country or that area, don't tell the locals the exact date. Like if your flight is tomorrow or like next Monday, I should say, tell them that you're going to leave on the Wednesday after that. And then obviously you're leaving before you said you're going to leave. And because he had some bad experiences out here, people try to rob him and kill him, and things like that. So,
jeez, that's a lifelong pursuit you've had here. And we love that because when you get into one of these rabbit holes, if it grabs you, you'll devote your life to it. And a lot of people in the rabbit holes that we talk to, that's what happens.
All right, parents, after the show, let's sneak in a little secret weapon for your morning routine. This episode of Blurry Creatures is proudly powered by none other than Beam Kids Super Powder, the pediatrician formulated chocolatey scoop that's secretly mashing up daily nutrition for your little blurry explorers. That's why Nate and I are so glad we found Beam Kids All-in-One Super Powder, because now instead of negotiating over broccoli, I just mix up a scoop of their chocolate milk and feel like a parenting genius. If you're a listener to the show, you know all about Beam Kids by now. Beam Kids is a one scoop a day of 40 essential ingredients, including greens, probiotics, prebiotics, fruits, and vitamins to help fuel healthy growth in all the flavors kids love. Chocolate milk and chocolate chip cookie. Our kids are obsessed with it. My son, Jack, asked for his chocolate milk every morning. And it's the way we can sneak in veggies and some of those things that he needs in a very blurry way. Beam Kids makes it simple. Combine 1 scoop with 8 ounces of milk, shake, stir, or froth, and you're good to go. Breakfast, lunch, and snack time. Beam Kids fits into any routine. And it's created by Olympic gold medalist and mom of 3, Shawn Johnson East, friend of the show. And yes, she knows a few things about fueling peak performance and taming picky eaters for breakfast. Beam Kids was co-developed alongside a pediatrician to deliver a smart, streamlined boost of clean nutrition that works just as hard as your little blurry kids do. And so right now, if you want to join us and the millions of other parents that are sneaking veggies and all the good things into their kids' routine via Beam Kids chocolate milk, all month Beam is offering up to 50% off Beam Kids for back to school when you go to shopbeam.com/blurry and use code BLURRY at checkout. If you've ever been on the fence to try Beam Kids, there's never a better time because this is the biggest discount Beam has ever offered. Go to shopbeam.com/blurry and claim your 50% off. That's shopbeam.com/blurry and use code BLURRY for up to 50% off.
Yeah, I feel like this is a calling where you don't plan it. You come out here just on a 1-week trip. You just want to see it for yourself. Then you go back home and people say, "Hey, tell me what you saw." And then started doing presentations. And then I made some YouTube videos, and then soon they blew up. And then people wanted to go on trips, so I had to do tours. But just wanting to do more research because the site was kind of abandoned. In fact, the visitor center was run down, and the water, coming down into the floor. And so in 2022, we got permission to renovate it and put in large posters and made a media room so people can watch videos about the site. And we have an area where they can see the fossils that are found around it. You're at an area that has a lot of seashells and fossilized sand dollars and coral. Wow. So yeah, we spent a lot of time and money renovating the building and working through the local politics, and then also just doing the science behind it. Which I'll explain to you guys when you want. But basically, we were able to do more geophysical surveys, chemical analysis. We have more planned, but a lot of this took a lot of time just to get to know the locals and the system, and things move slowly in the Middle East and here in Turkey. So we had to push through, and the multiple people trying to scam you out of money,
Yeah.
So it took a lot of effort, but we're still, still at it. We're not finished.
So some of the governments are pro for these things, and some of them are anti. What's the government?
Well, it depends on who we're dealing with. It's at first when you meet somebody and they're really friendly, you're kind of naive and you're thinking, oh man, they want to help. So you have people that will be like that and treat you nicely. Now, I've always been treated nicely out here. I was very hospitable to people. But there are those that probably just like in America and anywhere else that have other motives. And out here, because of the economy, usually the people who want to do harm, they want money. So we've run into people like that where they'll promise to help, but they want a certain amount of money. Or they'll say, "Hey, I'll show you a special site, like some archaeological discovery they made, but you need to give me some money,"
Yeah.
And so it can be difficult navigating all that, especially if you don't know anyone here. But thankfully, I was able to become friends with people who I've trusted over the years now and have helped me either translate, being translators or guides, or just drivers. And they've been able to warn me as, "Oh, hey, that person there, he's known for scamming," or "This person, watch out." So that has been very helpful. But the government officials, it depends who you talk to. There are those who are obviously pro-tourism and any opportunity to bring out more tourists, they don't care what you do kind of mentality. There are those, though, who are more cautious And for example, the type of research you want to do on the site, they don't want excavations yet. And we've heard different reasons. And so, working through just promoting what we can do on the site. But some of the reasons they've given, and so it depends. If you talk to someone who's really religious and they're a Muslim, then they'll say, well, the Ark is on Judy. The Quran mentioned the Ark landing on Mount Judy. And so now there's a traditional Mount Judy about 200 miles or so south of here in another province that borders Iraq. And that's where they'll say, in fact, that province promotes Noah's Ark down there. But the State Department tells people, like, don't go there for Americans. You can get kidnapped. So they don't get a lot of tourists down there. The province we're in here, there might be some warnings, but you get a lot of tourists coming, especially to climb the biggest mountain in Turkey, which is Mount Ararat.
Yeah.
But you meet these people that say Judy, but we have local Islamic scholars from the museum, the university here in Agri province, which is where the site is. It just borders Iran. In fact, we're 1 mile from the Iranian border. And the local scholars will say, well, the name Judy in the Quran, it doesn't mean one mountain. It's just talking about this high mountain range. It just means high place or high altitude. And so that's how they get around that. And so they're able to promote the Durupinar site without like being against the Quran. And then other reasons we've heard, they say, well, what if you dig it up? Like if you do actual excavation, you don't find anything, then you just ruined our, the tourist site. And of course, we're willing to take that risk because we believe the data shows there's something there. There might be another way to do like an excavation that's not a traditional method of putting a big hole in the site. Because the site is fragile, but all these years the boat formation has stayed there, it hasn't changed. Meanwhile, all around it has changed. Every spring you get storms. The winter storms, they get snow at the site, harsh winters, and so the mud around it, the dirt and terrain has changed. We have a series of photographs from the first photo in '59, then using declassified U.S. Spy satellite photographs for this area. And then looking at our drone photographs since 2018 onward, and then even people's photographs that's on the ground. But looking at it, you will see that the terrain around this boat shape has always moved. Every year it's changing. There's a new crevice open up. There's a new stream. But the Ark site is still 515 feet long. It's still a boat shape. Nothing's changed about it. It has not fallen apart. It has not become longer. So it suggests that the site is very stable. Like there's something below the surface that's holding it together, and that's what we're investigating, trying to figure out.
Andrew, I want to ask you, so you got there in the 90s, you have this connection with Ron Wyatt, and it sparks its interest, you go check it out. What for you made you feel like it was worth further investigation? Obviously it's a shape, obviously it has the right sizes if we talk about cubits in the Bible. And then what's interesting what you said about Judy is we know that like the biblical translation is the mountains of Ararat, right? It's the same kind of thing where it doesn't necessarily need to be Mount Ararat. I've heard this from a lot of folks saying that it's somewhere in the mountains would have been the language, mountains of Ararat, not Mount Ararat. But this is right location. What was it that kind of tipped the scales for you to be like, we've got to do more here?
Oh, for sure. In regards to the second point, for mountains of Ararat, the biblical account in Genesis says mountains. A lot of people gloss over that and they'll immediately say, oh, there's Mount Ararat. It's the tallest mountain. Let's go climb it, find Noah's Ark. It's a stratovolcano. It's about 17 miles north of us. You can see it from the site because we're across the valley from the mountain. A very beautiful mountain. But a couple of scholars actually pointed that out. Local scholars, so Muslim scholars, said, well, this is exactly what you're saying. We believe Judy is a mountain range and not an actual peak. And same with what we say about Mount Ararat, that the Bible says it's a mountain range. Urartu is the name that's originally where we get Ararat from. Yeah. The English word Ararat comes from this ancient kingdom of Urartu, and that was a nation state here that was in the mountains. So the mountains of Ararat was the mountainous kingdom. Just like I could say Noah's Ark landed in the mountains of Canada or the Rocky Mountains. Same idea. It's a general area, the not specific place on the map, and that's where the site is now. So when I first went out here, I had the early people in the 80s like Ron Wyatt, David Fazold, John Baumgartner, Dr. Salih Barak Tutan. These are people who had investigated the site and came away with different points and ideas as to the state of preservation and the work that they did. So they did, again, no excavations, but Ron did, for example, chemical analysis on a couple of his samples he'd taken, these soil samples. from the late 70s and in 84. Then they did metal detector scans just to see if there's any metal in the site. Him and Fazal, then later Dr. Sally Brock-Touton and Dr. John Baumgartner, they did radar scans, which lets you see below the surface without digging up anything. And so that was the state of, the investigation, besides, taking photographs of it and measuring the object, but nothing else. So when my first trip there, it was great just to see it. And it was like, oh, and I didn't think I was going to investigate. I was middle of college. I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to go out there and see what's there and start planning investigations. Ron was alive at the time. Fazal was alive. Sadly, both passed away within a couple of years after that. And then when I came back here in 2000, it was right the year after Ron died. And it was kind of a trip because some friends were going, so I joined up, and they were trying to figure out what to do. Ron Wyatt's gone now, and let's go look at the site. And we met up with Dr. Salih Burak-Tutan. He at the time was the main Turkish geologist who was investigating that area, that region. So he knew everything about almost every rock in that area. And he's still alive. In fact, he just got into town today, and we're interviewing him for a film we're making to show in the visitor center. But he's 84 now, I think. But so I met him in 2000, and that got me more interested in not for my own research plans, but just hearing what he had to say. But it wasn't until after 2014 that an acquaintance of mine did ERT scans out here. And that uses electricity instead of radar, which uses electromagnetic signals. Thousands of times a second will shoot into the ground and then map out the reflections coming back in the computer software. Well, ERT uses electricity current. And so whatever is more resistive, it'll map that out. So if you have like a rock or a pocket of air or water or types of soil, it will go faster or slower through those type of material. And the computer system, the software can make a 3D map of what's below the ground. And so it's a way to peer below the soil without disturbing it, just like the radar. And so this guy from New Zealand, he did the same thing in 2014, but that was the extent. And but I had access to the data and the results. And I asked a local friend, said, well, can we go further? Can we finally excavate? Now, he at that time was quite positive that it could happen. And we even thought in 2016 that something would happen. But sadly, in July of that year, they had a coup attempt out here. I don't know if you remember. And Turkey went into a state of emergency, whatever you call it, that it was very impossible to do anything. They had mass arrests, and people were being fired from their jobs, and it was just kind of chaos. And so I just stayed away from Turkey. And then in 2000, I think it was 18, I came back, and it was still, iffy about what could be done. But we met that fall, a Turkish archaeologist. And she, at the time, we trusted her a lot, this lady, but she was, making statements to us that, oh, yeah, I can help you guys get permits so we can do an excavation. She said this was part of her master's degree program. She wanted to make study of Noah's Ark into that. And so the next year, we got permission to do new radar. So for myself, the reason why I got involved was because I thought that we had newer technology and that what was done in the past was very not just, I don't want to say limited, but for example, the GPR back in 1984 and 85 or in 86, I think was actually the first year they did it. It was analog. So as you pulled the radar over the ground, you get a printout on thermal paper right there. That was the first time actually in Turkey GPR was ever used, was at the ARC site, according to Dr. Bayrak-Tutan.
Hey, Blurry Creatures listeners, before we dive back into today's mysterious encounter and episode, let's talk about something that's not so mysterious, your finances. You ever feel like money is vanishing into thin air, much like the elusive creatures we discuss? Enter Rocket Money, which has been designed specifically to help you track your spending, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and take control of your financial life. For me, it found a bunch of subscriptions that I wasn't using, even a duplicate subscription. It helped me lower my bills on cable and on my cell phone. And recently I found a subscription for a shopping service I didn't know I was paying for, wasn't using, and it was able to cancel super quickly. It saved me a ton of money and time, as Rocket Money can cancel subscriptions for you, and they can also renegotiate bills, as I said. So cable bills, cell phone bills, Rocket Money can negotiate those on your behalf, cutting out your time and saving you money. And on the whole, Rocket Money's probably saved me upwards of $1,000 just this year, and that's just counting. We've got plenty of time left. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. You can see all your subscriptions in one place. And if you see something you don't want, Rocket Money can help you cancel it. They give you a dashboard that shows you all of your accounts and spending. And like I said, they can negotiate bills and lower bills for you. They'll deal with customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money's 5 million members have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, with members saving up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions, reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Watch those subscriptions disappear. Right, Nate? Yeah, just like Nate disappeared. Cancel all your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Download the Rocket Money app and enter our show name, Blurry Creatures, into the survey so they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Download the Rocket Money app and tell them you heard about them from our show.
But now fast forward to 2019, over 20 years later, you're looking at digital systems that you can make 3D models, and you can slice and dice it on a computer, and all the different points, this cloud of data that the system will collect. And it just happened that not only we got permission that year, but that was the end of September. I remember when the archaeologists said, yeah, we can do radar work. But I only had a 3-week window, because by October, I think it was like 19th or so, this is 2019, I was leaving the country, and usually it's snowy out here into November. So I had 3 weeks to, number one, find a company that could do the work, fundraise, and bring them out here. And of course, hopefully there's good weather, because you can't do radar in the rain. So it all worked out. I mean, everything worked out. In fact, it was kind of really bad weather the week before. We had clouds and mist and some rain. But the days, I remember they arrived on a Sunday, and Monday through Thursday, the team out there collecting the data, the GPR and LiDAR, and with the guys with the thermal cameras, they had completely sunny days, some of the best weather I've seen. You could look from the site, you could look out and see Armenia way in the distance, the mountains in Armenia. And then Friday, they had an extra day to sightsee, and it rained on the team.
Wow.
The work was finished and rain came. So everything was perfect. And it just so happened that week that they came out to do the work was the week planned already by the Science Channel in their permit that they had got in the months before to film the site. They had contacted me in the summer, and they wanted to come out and film. And I said, well, we don't have anything planned, but they had to pick a date for their permit, their film permit from the Turkish government. And these guys show up right the time that now at the very end, we realized, this is the same time we're going to be doing the GPR work. So they had now something to film, and that was actually shown the next year in 2020 on cable television. But the data we got, this is stuff that was now even reanalyzed a couple of years ago in 2023 by a new geophysicist, and she was able to find corridors, tunnels underground. And this was what was in the newspapers this year.
Yeah.
A complete system going, and then even a big, if you call it a hole or a void, or I call it the atrium in the middle that goes through all the levels. It's basically a big pit, a squarish pit that starts about 6 meters down and goes 13 meters and beyond what our data is collecting below the surface. So, and then of course we're seeing angular structures, we're seeing parallel and right angle, perpendicular structures, all suggestive that there's something below the surface that is not this random noise, like rocks and dirt.
Yeah. So this year, I mean, this story was huge this year, Andrew. Like it hit every major media outlet. Are those the findings from 2023, or did you have new scans that you guys did this year?
Well, no. So what happened, I had a couple of newspapers. In fact, I saw one comment on one of the British newspapers, and the person was saying, oh, they paid for this. People contacted us, the reporters. We didn't pay for anything. And what happened, they were writing, I don't know why they were just regurgitating the story. They were bored or had like a slow news cycle, but they were writing one of the articles about the Durupinar site, and one of them contacted me and said, do you have anything new to share? I said, oh yeah, we do. And so I shared what the 2023 reanalysis of the 2019 GPR was showing, with the corridors, the possible rooms, and then the big, they call it atrium or hole in the ground in the middle. that's not filled in. She was saying you could walk through these places that they're not filled with mud. And so I shared that with them. But the big thing we had also done, and I mentioned this to the newspaper reporters, was that in September of last year, Dr. Sally Brock-Touton and Bill Crabtree, who's a soil scientist from Australia, who happened to be on one of my tours in September, they did analysis of the soil that hadn't been done. Now, Ron Wyatt did do basic analysis on 2 spots that he had collected soil from in 1977 that gave some interesting results. Just from two sites, it was showing that the inside the boat had almost 2.75% higher carbon than outside. But it was only done, you only had 1 sample from inside and 1 sample from outside. So you can't really do statistical analysis of that, because you only have 2. What if that 1 spot just happened to have higher carbon because a lot of minerals are right there or something, or a decayed tree happened to be right there. So, but that was really, what he was doing was great, because no one else was doing that. This was 77, he did that. Now, so when in 2024, last year, when we were out there with the tour, I told the geologist, the Turkish geologist, Dr. Bayrak Tutan, I said, hey, look, I'm flying the drone over, looking at these photographs, and the grass that's growing, and this is the first year I noticed this, but I'm sure every year this happens, but the grass that grows inside the boat shape was a yellow color, totally different color than right outside the formation. The grass growing in the terrain around it, in the mud flow or earth flow. So I told them, hey, why don't you guys design a study? I'm not a geologist, but you guys design a study that will determine what's going on here, like some type of soil analysis. And so we happen to have a soil scientist right there in the group, and they're just on a tour to see the site. They weren't planning to do any work, but Sally got permission to take these samples, and so he went out there and he collected, I think it was 88 samples across random sites inside and outside of the boat, 88 different locations. And then by December that year, he had gotten the analysis back from his old university, Ataturk University in Erzurum, Turkey. And what it showed was that inside the boat, it was actually matching on the carbon level, but we measured for organic matter, and it was showing that there was almost 3 times higher organics inside the boat across the site versus just right outside. Which was very important for us, because if this was an ancient decayed wooden boat that has decayed over time, buried here under the ground, it should affect the soil. And so, and then on top of that, we got I think it was 8 times the pH level was 8 times lower inside. And so then there's one other one that I keep forgetting. Is the phosphorus or potassium? That I think it was potassium that was higher inside versus outside. And so a combination of all this together, and when we talked to Bill, who's the soil scientist, and then a couple of his friends who also were soil scientists, when they reviewed the data and agreed that these were the analysis that these points that we had taken were showing significant differences inside the site, that they said, yeah, a wooden vessel would do this type of thing to the soil. You would expect these type of results for a decayed ship. This is just something we visually saw the grass. As someone, I remember this year, someone put out a video saying, "Oh, they're just trying to redo what was done in the past and get some news cycles out of it." And that was not exactly what happened. So we, on our own, we in fact, we didn't even go to the news until they asked us about it. But we saw that the soil was different. The grass was growing, and that's when we said, "Hey, let's just find out, whether the results are positive or negative. Let's just see what it shows." And that's when it came back that we had definitely way higher organic matter inside the site. So. That just gave us another clue to move forward.
So, and that's consistent, as you said. That's those numbers, the levels of pH, the levels of carbon. That's all consistent with the decay of wood, as you point out. Just to surmise, for
something wooden was there, basically.
Yeah, that decayed.
Yeah.
So what about? I mean, obviously, those audio listeners. It looks like someone left the hot iron on a clothes for too long, and it burned this like I mean, it looks just like a hot iron, a shape into the ground. If you're not looking, if you're driving or whatever, you can't see it. What other parts or evidence or interesting facts associated with this site that are there? You're saying there's seashells, other things that are like kind of anomalous to this area that give clues that we're not just trying to make this site into something it isn't. There's other things. There's rumors that the boat had these giant weights on it that are like left in the area as well. Is there things like that support this as being just more than an interesting site?
Yeah. So, I think excavations will obviously get us
Yeah.
to under the ground and seeing what we think we're seeing with the scans. But it's more than that. So, for example, if you just look at how we approach the site in the past, everyone like Ron Wyatt and Fazold and Baumgartner, even Salia Bayrak Tutan, who's around, what got everyone's attention was the ship shape.
Yeah.
Now, why is that important? Well, here's a good example of something that, if you think it's Noah's Ark, like someone trying to force it Noah's Ark, a lot of people think Noah's Ark was this rectangular barge. And so, yeah, if we had found a rectangular rock, we could do that. Say, oh, well, this is Noah's Ark and petrified. And there's some groups out there who find rocks and they say, oh, like there's a guy who says he found Noah's Ark in Iran, and he just, there was nothing there, but he was bringing back rocks and trying to make it petrified wood. As you look at this site from the air, as you're saying, it looks like a hot iron. It has that pointed tip and a rounded end. And so what's interesting, if you actually look at like ship design and studies done on that there's a reason why they for ships that are on the open sea, like has to deal with rough seas, like in the ocean versus going down the river, they have a pointed end for a reason. And so here so it was like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I had a tour through here, and we meet random people even when we have a group. And this one guy comes with me at the business center, not part of our tour, and he's American. He says, "You're Andrew Jones," and I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Well, my name is I won't give his name yet, but we'll have a video about him." But he said, "Oh," and I said, "Okay," and he said, "I was in the Coast Guard for 30 years. And on top of that, I was a captain of two ships." I said, "Okay, that's great." He says, "What you're looking at over there," and he was pointing outside the window to the Durupinar shape that's sitting on the side of the mountain. And we're inside the business center on the western hill that looks down on it. And he said, "What you have over there is a shipwreck." And I said, "Well, tell me about this ship shape, because a lot of people want to attack that, so you have to have it as a square ends or a rectangular, shape." And he said, "Well," he says, "if you look at World War II ship designs, when we built our ships in World War II, we had the exact same shape with a pointed end and a rounded bow." And he said the pointed end helps you cut through the waves, even if you don't have an engine or a sailboat, if you're just floating on the water. When oncoming waves would hit a ship, you need to be pointed. We interviewed him at one of those drogue, weight stones. We'll talk about it in a bit.
Yeah.
But he explained all this on video. He was saying like the pointed end has to be pointed into the wave. If you're parallel and in the trough between the waves, you're most likely going to capsize. It's going to roll you over the next wave that hits. And so on using a pointed end, you can cut through the waves. And then what about the rounded back end? He said, well, you do get ships, you do get waves hitting the back of a ship, and that helps disperse the energy. He said this type of design was used in World War II. And then he said, starting in the 90s, early 90s, the Coast Guard started building the same type of ships with a pointed end and a blunt for the front, and then a blunted back end. And then he said he later was on the National Security Council. I think it was under George Bush, the second administration, or it might have been the first Trump administration. But anyways, and then he said now he works for the Saudi. He's a consultant, his company, for the Saudi Ministry of Defense. And so he was well connected, but he had the ship background. So whatever he worked at, he used to be captain of two Coast Guard ships, and so he knew his stuff. And I looked him up on YouTube, found some old interviews where he's being interviewed about some hostage situation or something. So, and so he was, he was legit, and he had a degree in one of those fields that he was working in for the military. But The ship shape to me is the good is a really strong point as to why this is the real Noah's Ark versus any other site. And in fact, there's no really other site. I mean, there's not like someone say, okay, go to this latitude, longitude, and this is the real Noah's Ark. Like, let's compare two ships. There's no other site to compare it to. You just have general stories and eyewitness accounts from someone who said when there was a kid they saw the ark.
Yeah.
But now where is it?
Yeah.
So there's no other site. But this site you can walk down and investigate. And so when you're asked about like what other things besides the scans, well, I think the ship shape is very strong, but it is sitting on sedimentary rock and dirt. This area that was laid down by water, which to me is a strong point against some people who say it was up on Ararat, which is a volcano, that the stratovolcano that was erupted and built and formed after the flood. It's on flood deposits itself. Underneath it, you have all this sedimentary rock and layers laid down by water. And this, where we're at, same thing. This boat is sitting on sedimentary layers. So around it, you find fossils. We have seashells and coral and snail, underwater snails and sand dollars, all in the rocks there. We have examples of it in the visitor center. The local shepherd, the Kurdish kids that have the sheep out there on the hillsides, we've been giving them money because they go up near the border where we're not supposed to be. And we'll say, if you find something like this, bring it down. And they would, bring down chunks of coral that they come across as they're watching their sheep. And we went up there too in tractors and brought back really big blocks with a tractor from above the site, these chunks of fossilized coral that, so it's shallow water type of creatures that are fossilized now. So that's the main thing, though, is that you have the ship shape that's exactly the length in the Bible that got everyone interested. And so what we're doing now, we're trying to, in a non-destructive way, study it as much as possible as we try to formulate a plan that will preserve it while we can excavate, like possible side tunnels that are non-traditional ways to excavate, but they'll get us access to the layers inside that we're seeing on the scans. And plus core drilling. That's another way, like a 3-inch hole that you can drill down and pull out samples.
Interesting.
So these are some of the ways we're hoping. And plus, put a core down into one of these chambers and stick a camera, and so that's another thing we're hoping to do.
So you're saying that the chambers are still, you guys believe them to still be hollowed out, like they're covered, like there's a hollow spaces.
That's what exactly. That's what the geophysicist told us. She said, in fact, she thought we had dug a tunnel. She said, did you guys dig a utility line through this area? I said, and she didn't, I guess, know the location or what we're looking at, because we just sent them the raw data. We said, find whatever you can find in here. We don't say, try to prove it's Noah's Ark. And then they volunteered. This was the one lady, the latest, who's looking at the data, volunteered to look at it. And Dr. Sally Barak-Tutan told me, because I asked him, said, find me another geophysicist. And he said, well, I recommend this lady. She has 30 or 40 years experience in the field, and send her the raw data. And so she told me you could hunch over and walk through some of these spots. So they're not filled in, they're hollow.
Wow.
And so hopefully we can drill a hole in and see what's down in those cavities.
So you have, just to recap, you've got a pointed end of the ship, which helps cut through the waves, which a lot of people say, oh, it was built like a coffin. But if it's built like a coffin, you have these people who work in the industry say, no, that would actually capsize the ship. It's the same length as its description in the Bible. You have the sediment that's been underwater. You have proof that this was covered with water at one point. It hasn't changed. You're saying that there might be some fossilized wood that's keeping the shape the same over the last 40, 50 years of the photos that we have. And then you have the local kids finding, evidence of coral, seashells, and things like that. And then you can look underneath it with advanced technology, and we see like what appears to maybe be cages for animals and other things
or rooms
inside a boat.
Yeah.
That you probably wouldn't find in any other LiDAR scans or anything like that, just in a random.
And an atrium is fascinating too.
Yeah.
Like Noah spent some time building a little luxury cruise ship.
He had a deck
animals.
that he looked at. But I mean, you hear these things, and it's kind of like it's all shaping up to be ship shape. Hey.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like when we do a study, let's do GPR this year. Let's do soil analysis. we're not forcing the results. We're like, okay, well, it came back that there's 3 times as much organic outside versus inside. And we picked, 88 random sites inside and outside total to do that soil test. We didn't know what the results would be until December last year. And it could have been nothing. I could have just been, a nothing burger. But
Right.
we actually got results that, just like the radar, we sent it to the lady. Tell us what you find. She's not part of our group. I don't know if she's even Christian or trying to promote Noah's Ark or what she believes. But she came back and said, hey, this is what I'm finding. I see a central corridor tunnel going all the way from the pointed end uphill, the southern end, to the middle of the boat at the 4 to 5 to 6 meters down. And then from there, it connects into the top of what looks to be a central atrium, a void in the ground that's square shape. And that void goes down to the 13-meter level. And it probably goes further because we lose our data right at that point. The GPR data doesn't go that deep. And so, and then she sees a side tunnel, like one that follows the inside of the boat hull, that's broken up more, but possibly filled in. So, and then the other side, we don't see anything, probably all gone. We assume that they're what you call it, mirrored.
Yeah.
If the ship design had tunnels on each side. So it's just like, wow, okay, there's more here that we didn't realize. And when we first analyzed the results back in 2020 from that 2019 trip, again, this is the latest data. We in 2019, the ship was scanned with 2 different types of radar by a team that had, again, that was like a miracle that all pulled together. But it was someone who contacted me the week that we got the permission to do it. This random person from Georgia said, hey, I saw you on some video on YouTube, and I would like to volunteer somehow. Do you need any help with anything? And I said, well, we're trying to, we got 3 weeks. We're trying to do radar work. And he said, well, my friend works for a company. He's VP of this company, and they do that. And so I was put me on the phone with that guy. And this is a weekend. I remember by Monday or Tuesday, we had agreed upon the terms of my contract. They reduced their price. They had their crew ready to go, and everything was set up. And then we were able to sign contracts that week and fundraise. It was a $25,000 project for their 1-week trip out here, and everything worked out. And when we looked at that data in 2020, we had an American archaeologist who trains on GPR for other archaeologists. He shows them how to use it. And when he looked at it, his initial analysis was, okay, one place on the boat, I'm seeing angular structures that suggests that, hey, this is probably the best site to excavate right here, because you usually don't find these angular structures in nature. There's a whole series of them. And this was about 7 meters down, or 21 feet. This was on one area of the boat. And so this was the spot that he highlighted in his analysis. And then that was it. He didn't get involved with our project. So fast forward, to 2023, and we get in contact with this other lady, and she does a more thorough analysis of the data. And it just, she then finds stuff that we didn't expect. We didn't know that there was preserved, tunnels or holes, cavities down there.
What about the ship weights you mentioned that we would get to? What's the deal with
so
that?
they're further away from the site.
And there's supposedly a grave as well.
A what?
And it's supposedly Noah's grave is supposed to be
Noah's grave is there?
Noah's
Did we find his vineyard?
Well, yeah.
He planted a vineyard right after to make wine. Did we find his vineyard too? We got to find those things. There's probably a great opportunity, Andrew, to open a winery next to the visitor center.
Exactly.
You could really capitalize on that.
Noah's wine.
Yeah.
Get little,
just don't
little travel size bottles.
Don't drink too much, and otherwise Kane and me. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Yes. But in regards to the ship weights, so again, this was back in the 70s. Ron Wyatt's first trip out here. He goes out outside of town, with the town I'm living in right now that has the hotels, and the closest town to the site, which has hotels, is Durupinar. And so the Ark site's about 30 minutes to the east of town, up in the low mountains across from Mount Ararat, right by the Iranian border. The drogue stones, which are the technical name that people are calling them, these weights that were put on boats, these type of stones are found northwest of Durupinar, about 15 minutes outside of town, in a little village on the map. It's called Salaksuyu, which means healthy water. And there's a big spring there. It's one of the biggest springs in the whole regions right there. A lot of lush green pastures. So that village there has really good water. And in fact, they've found not just there used to be a very big Armenian church there that's been destroyed, they say, by an earthquake or other things happened to it. But all the stones have been reused by the villagers and their fences and houses. So there's nothing much left, but you have this graveyard, a pretty big graveyard there with standing stones, and some of them have fallen over, but there are a number of them. I think 26 so far has been found in that region that have holes in them. So yeah, these huge stones are standing or laying around. Now the theory is that they're called drogue stones, which were used as counterweights or weights on the sides of a boat to keep it stable in a large storm, and also to help point it into the waves. And in fact, the guy that I mentioned earlier, who's the Coast Guard captain, he mentioned that on modern ships, they don't obviously use stone weights like that, but they do have drogue, not drogue stones, but the same type of purpose that they have underwater that will, if there's a big storm, or they need to point the ship into the waves.
Oh, there we go.
They can use that.
We're pulling them up now. You can see those photos. They're massive. I mean, they look like...
Yeah, so Ron, during his lifetime, he found, I think, a dozen.
Okay.
And then since that time, more have been found. That's the big one. That's the biggest one so far there. In fact, in those photos, 1/3 of the actual stone is still below the surface.
Wow.
So you just look at the top one, and there's this massive hole in it. The idea that some Noah tied ropes around it and through the hole, and that these were tied to the ship, and that they were used to keep the ship stable in the storm. And then sometime right before the flood ended, some type of mechanism, he cut them loose, or whatever happened, and that they fell off the ark and landed in this area about 20 miles from the site.
The theory is he's cutting them as it's kind of drifting towards the end, cutting them off the sides.
Yeah, according to the biblical account, towards the end of the flood, there's water on the earth, but there's no more storm, so it's not like you're in a big the rain's not coming down anymore. It's not like rough seas, and that's when he starts he lets the birds out to see if they can find dry land. And so it's possible that this location is where he opened it up and let loose one of the birds, the raven maybe. And that's what happened. And so then he's okay, we're getting close to where there's dry land, cut them loose. Other people suggest, well, maybe God just knew exactly what will happen, so God just did it himself and cut them loose.
Yeah.
But anyways, these stones are just scattered all through that valley, up on the hills and into. Some of them have been reused by the Armenian Christians who used to live there, so they have crosses on some of them, but not all of them. So now Ron did, some people might say, well, this is 20 miles away, so how do you associate this with the boat up by the Iranian border? So Ron did say he had found 2 more near the site in the mud flow. And we've, that mud flow changes every year, but so far we have not relocated those 2. But he said he had seen 2 more close to the boat. Like one was a quarter mile away, and then other was just down the mountainside.
Andrew, are there any other explanations for these type of rocks with holes in the top? Is there anything else people are trying to hypothesize? Because it seems like what you're saying it is. I don't know what else.
Well, so it's difficult because they haven't been studied that much. For one thing, what we're doing, we are taking samples. We have already got a bunch of samples of the rock, and we're just trying to see if it's local rock. If it's from nearby, then that would suggest that these were made after the flood, maybe in memory of the ark. Again, it's a lot of theory and speculation for the stones themselves, because there's no written documentation about them. Some of them have crosses again, some don't. Now, the big one you saw in your photographs there, that one, when you look through the hole, it actually points to the mountain, Mount Ararat.
Wow.
So it's possible someone set it up and just made it as a memorial to the flood, or they thought, the memorial to the drogue stones on the ark. Many possibilities. It's very difficult to know without more studies.
But if they come back because they're from, like, let's say the Holy Land, the area of the Greater Israel, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, where do you think the ark was built?
Yeah, that's a good. I know a lot of people ask that. What do you think? And the Bible doesn't say. So it depends on your view. If it was a global flood that destroyed the whole earth, then it's very difficult to find where it originally came from, because the Bible's even the other ancient accounts don't say much. But if you think it was a local flood, I believe it's a global flood. But for those who think it was a local flood, then they say, well, the ark came from Mesopotamia, near Babylon and Iraq, and then some type of disaster pushed the ark way over where it's at now, up in the mountains here. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to know where the ark itself was built. Now, we had one gentleman, he actually left a paper at the visitor center, and he's from Spain, and I don't know what type of background he has, but he had written this whole document explaining that this was where they built the ark. That's the shape we see. Now, my biggest problem with that is if somehow the shape of the ark existed like where they built it, why did that survive the flood? If everyone's being killed and everything's being drowned outside, but the ark building site was preserved, why is it ship shape? Do they have a concrete bottom? I don't know. Anyways, you can see there's a lot of theories out there, but I really do believe this is the original. This is the ark. I've had people say it's the Nephilim ark, which they say are the giants.
Oh yeah.
Somehow the giants survived the flood, so that they had their own ark.
Oh,
I see that comment a lot on my YouTube videos.
Yeah. What do you think about that? You think they had
the
a boat?
Nephilim ark, dude?
Well, no, there's lots of jokes.
Well, yeah, because they're giants before and after. I understand the premise. Is what our show
Bigfoot
lives in
built
this
his own
space,
boat.
bro. Yeah.
Well, so so as a Christian, since I am a Christian, looking at the New Testament account, I don't, so I guess it comes down to, do you believe the Nephilim were considered people or like souls? Because, according to the New Testament, only 8 people survived, which matches what the Old Testament said. So these other people that were on their own boat doesn't make any sense. If you watch the NBC movie from the 90s, I remember I watched as a kid, and they had Lot as a pirate. He was attacking Noah's Ark, but he had his own boat. I always thought that was funny.
Dude,
and
Lot's
sad
out there.
that 2 different stories in the Bible, 2 different time periods, and they put Lot as a pirate attacking Noah's Ark.
Certainly a lot of creative liberty there.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if they had never really seen rain, that's a lot of the theories. There was no foreknowledge of what a storm, like rain, a total catastrophe like that could even look like. It would be something where Noah would probably have had to been told a little more information.
Yeah.
That what was
Which
coming.
means, how do the other guys know? Let's say just said, let's copy Noah just in case.
Yeah.
Because how do they build their ark? Noah took at least 120 years to build it, or maximum was 120 years.
Is there anything to his gravesite that supposedly is in the area?
Yeah, that is the most interesting, because so Ron goes out there in 77, and on that same trip that he finds these drogue stones nearby in that village, he makes a second trip so it's like on day number 2, he goes out there with his kids, and they find this place, and he has old footage on YouTube, you can see, where it's his old home movies, and you see one of the large stones standing up, and you can barely see what he says is carved on it. And what he said, there were 8 people at the bottom. 2 were large figures. The largest was a man, the second was this woman, and then above it there was this wave, like you would surf, and sitting on top of the crest of the wave was the boat shape, an arc, and above it was a rainbow, this arch going all the way around it. And this was on both stones, but one stone, the petroglyph, or what do you want to call it, rock carving, was different. One actually had the woman's eyes closed only, and then the other one had both of them. So it suggests, according to Ron, that the first one was Mrs. Noah. She died first, and the next one was his grave. And this was found in front of an ancient building just outside the village. Now, Ron made a self-published book in the early 80s, and kind of putting all his theories together, that the Durupinar site was Noah's Ark, and here's some other flood evidence from the petroglyphs, 20 miles away, about the flood story. And he handed these books out to a whole bunch of people looking for Noah's Ark, especially on Ararat. In the 80s, it was the big thing every summer, and Ark hunters would come out here looking. So in 85, he comes out here in March, and it's the first time that David Fazold's involved. He's a marine salvage expert and a treasure hunter from Florida at the time. And he didn't believe Noah's Ark landed on Mount Ararat. He thought, well, if it did, it would have been pushed down because it's a volcano. The lava flow would have pushed it down to the base. not near the summit where some people are claiming they saw it. And he talked to Jim Irwin, who was the astronaut, and looking for Noah's Ark in the 80s. And, he walked on the moon. He was one of those astronauts. And he talked to Jim, and Jim said, why don't you talk to Ron Wyatt? Ron believes this site is across the valley and not on Mount Ararat. You guys can work together. And so he got a hold of Ron, and Ron invited him out and said, I'm going out there in March of 85. He gets out there, and Ron's trying to show him all his sites. And so he brings him out to this village. There's snow on the ground a little bit. And they get to the site where these two headstones were, one that had fallen over with the carving, and they're gone. And on top of it, there's a huge trench. And up till a couple of years ago, you could still see the trench, this depression in the soil. And it was like 18 feet long. I remember we even measured it. There's this huge trench. So, and all the stones were missing. The two big stones were broken up and the pieces were gone. Ron reported it to the police. And then later he got an update and they said, yeah, we found the villager who helped. So sadly, it was an American who paid a villager $300 who helped dig up this site. And it was an American who read Ron's little booklet that Ron talked about this possibly being Noah's grave. Everything was gone. But to get the information out of the villager, according to Ron, the police pulled out his toenails or something, like one of the nails, get him to talk. And he basically, he spilled the beans. And he said that they found this 15 or 18 foot long stone sarcophagus box deep in the ground right there. And they opened it up and it was a giant skeleton inside with a lot of gold. And everything was taken away. The crime, this grave robbery was investigated up to certain levels of government, but then the investigation stopped. So the assumption was that this guy who had gotten all that gold was able to use that funds to pay off whoever was in charge of the higher levels for the investigation. So it went nowhere, and that was it. But so ever since that time, people in the village, when they see a foreigner in that village, they think, oh, they're looking for treasures. And so when I was there, my first trip in '97, I remember one time, one of the days we were out there, and the local guide told us, get in the car right now. So we jumped in, and then the driver just took out of the village on another road out. I said, what's going on? He said, well, the villagers were yelling, they're looking for the gold, in Kurdish. And so our guide, he knew, he was a Turkish Kurdish guide, and he knew what they were saying. He said, we need to get out of there. We were just taking pictures. We weren't looking for anything. But that's the whole idea that there's giants in that valley there. It was also other stories started appearing. And then one hotel, I remember I saw a photograph. I don't know if I could, it wasn't one by us, but it was, one of the old 35 millimeter photos that someone had taken a scan of. But it was this giant skull sitting in a hotel lobby in Dole Bayzet, this town here. And I remember my first trip here in '97, they showed us the photograph, and it was just this huge skull sitting on a counter. Strange for the hotel lobby. But then the next year, or 2 years or 3 years later, in 2000, when I came back, it was gone. Like no one knew anything about like what happened to it and what it was. But so then fast forward to 2 years ago, we had Pastor Rick Renner out here from he's an American who moved to Moscow, and since the fall of communism, he's been doing pastoring work in Moscow. He came out here and wanted to do a series of films about Noah's Ark, and so we were in this village again, and we're just driving down this little alley type road. And a villager comes out because we kind of slowed down in front of his house looking at these strange stones in his wall. And he said, come have chai. Everyone's very hospitable. And so we get to know this guy. Now he's a good friend of mine. But he takes us to his backyard and he has all these paving stones. He said was from the Armenian church that's now gone. And one of the stones has a ship shape, like Noah's Ark on it. And he has other stones. And we're talking to him and he says, yeah, when I was a kid in about 85, 86, my cousin and I, on our family land, we dug up this mound that had stones all around the bottom of the mound, and we went to we dug down to the inside he said, I think 4 or 5 meters down, and he said they uncovered a skeleton that was huge. So another story comes out of the village again that this area has giant skeletons. So Ron believed that Noah was a giant, that it wasn't just Nephilim, but that Noah himself was larger than people today, at least 15 feet tall. So
that's wild.
There's a couple of videos floating around, like a finger bone or something was found, Noah's finger bone.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah.
There's you go out there even when they actually excavated the grave area. They didn't, according to some people, they didn't go deep enough. But the Turkish archaeologists went out there in 2022, and they found two graves that were shallow graves. One was a woman, and the other was a child, but they're normal height. But it's when you walk around, there's pottery pieces all over that site.
Yeah.
And what it looks like now, though, is that the top building that Ron was calling the house, who knows what's below that, but the top building looks like to be an Armenian chapel. They found Armenian inscriptions on some of the stones. It has a curved apse on the one end.
Yeah.
The other end where the entrance were two columns that they had found there. So who knows? They build a chapel on top of the house.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, these giant graves are found all over the place.
Well, we talked to the one in Afghanistan.
Yeah. There's one in Afghanistan. They're all over Sardinia, and they're all in America too. In the Ohio Valley here, they've dug them up, and the farmers were digging them up here. And then the same story though every time. They just go MIA.
Yeah.
The museums.
Yeah. Well, they had the photos.
Yeah.
From
That's
the
crazy.
1800s, you see the actual newspaper photographs of these skeletons. But then, what happened to the specimen? They just disappeared.
Well, they were on display, like in Catalina. They were in other places, museums for a long time until they just.
And they're always kind of buried in given like a royal burial, in a sarcophagi or some sort of buried with stuff in a certain way. People are around them.
Where the gold at?
Where the gold? Yeah. Dude, Andrew, this is incredible.
How far is this location from like Göbekli Tepe and when those things are happening? Because I know there's always a connection saying that because of the dating of those and it being like very, very much closely after with the cataclysm or the flood or Younger Dryas, all those different things, that there's a lot of hypothesis that a lot of those ancient things are buried and then now are being excavated, even just only like 5% at Göbekli Tepe, that those could be related to civilization beginning again after this Noah's Ark event. Is that close, far? What's the proximity from where you guys are to those places?
Well, so I just drove there because we just finished what I call our Patriarch tour, which is the Book of Genesis. So we went from Noah's Ark here in eastern Turkey to southeast Turkey. So to Haran, where Jacob's well is, and where 11 of the 12 sons of Jacob were born in Haran. And this is where Jacob got his two wives, Rachel and Leah. Yeah. His mother, Rebecca, came from Haran. Abraham's father died there on his way to Canaan. So it's a very strong biblical site. And the name is that's for sure. So just up the valley or up the plain, so Haran Plain it's called, is Urfa, the biggest city in that area. And just 15 minutes east of the city of Urfa is Göbekli Tepe. So part of our tour, we see all those sites, Karan Tepe sometimes, but definitely we see Göbekli Tepe. Now, I just drove back from there, so that took us, I don't know what the miles would be or kilometers, but I remember it took us leaving Urfa, not 12 hours, 9 hours driving.
Yeah.
And so it's not close. But here's the interesting thing, that it's if you look where the Ark site is, and you look at the migration people would have done after the flood from this region where I'm at right now, how do you get from here to Mesopotamia, where the Bible says the first cities were built, and where archaeology even agrees that this is where the civilization was restarting? Now we find in northern Mesopotamia, which is southern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, Karan Tepe, this whole Tash culture or stone culture, new sites that we didn't know about 50 years ago. So right near here, the site of Dol Bayzet, the city, it's in the Dol Bayzet plain. And when you go to the western end of the plain, it's just a little gentle high rise in the hills. You walk over, and on the other side of the watershed, to the western side of that all that water there drains into the Murat River, which is right there, and that's the main tributary of the Euphrates. So from here, you just go you don't have to go over a mountain pass. It's just a little rise in the hills, and now you're into the Euphrates River Valley system. The start of the Euphrates is right here, and you just follow that east to west, and then you turn south at the very end, and it opens up into Mesopotamia. So and right there where it opens up is northern. The Mesopotamian plains, the Haran plain. It's also, the area of Göbekli Tepe. So the very first people leaving Noah's Ark, you can see them migrating along, following the easiest path, which is the river valleys with their sheep and everything. And then they end up on the big plains that starts in southern Turkey and goes through Syria and Iraq, Mesopotamia. And this is the north area, like the very first area where the plain opens up in southern Turkey is where Göbekli Tepe is found and these other sites. So that's a strong connection of the migration for people. Now, who built it or how is it connected to Noah's Ark? It's very difficult to know because there's no writing per se. There's symbols and animals carved on the stone, the T-shaped columns, and there's still debates as to what was the purpose of these sites. There's 14 of them found so far, I believe. There's probably a lot more. So it's very mysterious. I love being out there. I was out there with the Ancient Alien crowd from the History Channel, and I was the drone operator for one of their shows, and I filmed Quran Tepe from the air for them back in 2 years ago.
Was it Hugh?
Was it Hugh Newman?
The two British guys.
Yeah, it's Hugh.
Andrew Collins.
Yeah, Andrew Collins and Hugh Newman. Yeah, he was a buddy of ours.
Yeah, they were out there.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I was just a drone guy. He probably doesn't remember me. But my friend he's in charge of he's the chairman of the Turkish Film Commission, so he gets the permits for all the History Channel says they want to film out here, that he gets the permits for them. So he contacted me and said, Andrew, you want to do some drone work for me? I said, sure. And so it's for that, one of their episodes.
That's awesome.
That is.
He was a great dude. He's a Giants guy. He's not necessarily a Bible guy, which we are. But great guy. He's been on the show a few times.
It's interesting because everyone brings different perspectives, and then maybe they'll find something or connect the dots that we wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I know on one of his tours, I saw an advertisement on Facebook. One of them is actually bringing groups out to the Durupinar site now.
Yeah,
as part of their tour schedule. Yeah. So I had never met him because I was gone his first tour was I think last year to this area. He might repeat it. It's happened to be gone that weekend that they were coming through with their group.
Well, tell them the Blurry guys.
I think they have.
Who says?
I think a lot of these guys have a similar, where like the data, the discoveries, the search for treasure is on the forefront. I mean, a lot of those guys talk about giants too. There's a lot of similar paths where the fringe Christians and the ancient alien dudes they cross in a lot of these places because there's a narrative that's not popular. And like when we were in Peru, they shut us down at Machu Picchu for talking about alternate history ideas. So even in third world countries, even places where they're still trying to protect the narrative, and we got shut down.
Egypt.
We got shut down in Egypt. Yeah, other these places. So you have some places where they don't care. That it seems like they don't care. But then obviously this is going to bring tourism, money. So they're kind of like, let's not squash this. But is there anywhere else in the world that looks like this, that this could be mistaken for the skeptics? If we're going to go like into the skeptical, wow, maybe there's other sites that look like this, and it could just be
like boat-shaped, anomalies.
Well, yeah. So you have a couple. I know there's a couple people who will Answers in Genesis. They write some great articles showing why the ark did not land on Ararat, which in the past everyone was Ararat focused. All the creation groups and Christian groups. And then when they couldn't find anything, they kind of basically went to other sites. Some people now are focused on the Quran site in Mount Judy. Others say it's west of Ararat, but no one has a specific site you can look at. But what the Answers in Genesis people, one of their videos, especially after all the news hit about this site this year, every year it's not like a cycle of news about it. And this year maybe there'll be more if we once we release more studies.
Yeah.
But in regards to the site, one of the things they say is that you can find these all over, and you can't. That's the whole thing. I never understand why people say that, and then they don't actually show you a site where it's just the same thing as this, same shape and the same length as Noah's Ark. Not even close to anything here. In fact, I would go back to the 1959 aerial survey when they were, mapping out Turkey in detail for military reasons. This is the only one that popped up. They didn't find a fleet of boats. It was just one, and they named it the Durupinar site because he found it. But he didn't see any other sites like that in the mud flow or even on Ararat. Some people have a black and white photo from the 80s. I think it was about a plane. It's kind of an angular, oblique photo. And they say, look, you see these ship shapes on there, but there's nothing there. If that was actually there, people like the Ararat people, especially, they should go up there and they would be all over that place trying to, GPR it and whatever else, measure it. But no, I have not seen another, unless the other ship shapes you do find are actual archaeological sites that people have excavated, Roman, Greek ships, early
Viking
Bronze Age ships.
Viking ships.
So yes, there are other wooden vessels that when you think about what people were promoting as and getting a lot of money for it, promoting as Noah's Ark on Ararat, like so-called eyewitness accounts, they were claiming after all these years there was a perfectly preserved barge in the ice up on this mountain.
Yeah, I heard that
Now
story.
since now in the past you couldn't verify. It's like, oh wow, someone comes back, it says, my grandfather told me this. I was Armenian, or they just like claimed that I was a pilot in World War II and I saw it from my window,
Yeah.
and you couldn't verify it. So it's a great story. They made old films in the '70s about it. But it was a mysterious land, Eastern Turkey. No one's going to go out there and verify their story so they can make some money on it. Today, Ararat's open for tourism. You have a lot of Eastern European, Russian, even American climbers just for trekking purposes because it's the tallest mountain in Turkey, going up and down that mountain every day, or when it's good weather. So, and none of them have found anything in the ice or taking photos and come back down. And in fact, today you don't have to climb it. You can use Google Earth or buy your own commercial satellite imagery of the area, and it's way better than it used to be. And you can explore the mountain virtually on your laptop and try to find Noah's Ark up there. And so now, definitely, there's nothing on that mountain. So Answers Genesis then made a study trying to disprove Mount Ararat. It's a good job. Yeah, they even they don't approve of the Durupinar site, but their study of Ararat shows that it's a post-flood volcano, as I mentioned earlier, that it erupted over and over, the stratovolcano. Everyone agrees upon that, but it sits on top of flood deposits. So that means after the flood, this mountain erupted. And all that lava you see, if you look at satellite imagery or tourist photos, my drone photographs, all that lava on the outside of the mountain, on the base of the mountain, it's all lava that erupted and formed above ground, not underwater, not like Hawaii, the pillow lava.
Mauna Kea, yeah.
So we know this mountain existed and formed above ground, not under any water, So it was not around for Noah to even land a boat on. It erupted after the flood. I don't people who still promote up there and try to fundraise for money to look for the Ark. God bless them, but it's I think it's a waste of time. All that money and expenses. I wish that people would direct it to this site, and we can fully do what we need to do on this site.
Figure out what it is. It's definitely an anomaly.
Yeah,
well, that's a good segue though. Like, so what's next, Andrew? Obviously you've got these scans that they're from 19 that were redone in 23. You did you've done a core drilling, at least 80 samples in partnership with the university there in Turkey. What's next? I know you guys want to excavate, and you've talked a little bit about how you would do that creatively to not dig up the site, right? But what's next for 2025 and forward as far as what you guys are planning on doing to further verify and investigate this site as the site of Noah's Ark?
Well, the biggest thing we would like to get to is core drilling. And now, when you mentioned the cores, what we got in 2024, the 88 sites, those were near surface soil samples.
Okay.
So not like any couple meters down. It was just under, basically with the weeds, the grass, the root system underneath that, were these samples taken. But even near surface, again, it was getting the results showing, hey, inside soil is way different from outside soil. So what we want to do now, there's more analysis of the soil that the geologist, Dr. Breyer Tuton, would like to do, because one thing about the site that we can see from all these photographs, including the recently acquired declassified U.S. government spy satellite photos of the region, we're seeing the ship shape always there, but everything moving around it. So this thing is very stable. But when you walk on it and look at it, the soil is also harder. There's something chemically different about the soil that he would like to test to see somehow when the ship decayed, if this is Noah's Ark, it affected even the hardness of the soil to keep the shape together all these years. And so we like to test for this, see what's going on with that. Core drilling, real core drilling, like going down like 100 meters to get a whole sample of the different layers. And then also coring into some of these open spaces and putting in cameras. What will happen this year? I don't know.
Yeah.
This is, we laid out So they had a new university rector who was appointed by the central government for the government university in this region. And when I got back here after being in the Middle East for 6 months, down in Jordan and Egypt, Israel, so I came back to Turkey and I met with the new rector. And his chief assistant or advisor told me, "You're." I mean, they're so happy with all the press. They say,
Right.
"Man, Andrew, you're doing a great job." And I said, "Well, it's all organic. Like I'm doing the interviews, but I don't, I didn't like ask for these people to interview me. But they're very happy about this hearing their province in the news. But they came up to me and said, "We want whatever you're doing. We're partnered with you." And of course, that's great because you have to work with the locals. You can't just go out there and, as a foreigner, you can't dig up a site or do something like that. So we'll see what they decide. We made a list. Like I gave it to the university. I said, "Hey, this is our plan. Whether we do some this year or all of it." So on that list, I mentioned core drilling, soil sample again, but also other type of geophysical surveys like microgravity, which the lady who analyzed our GPR data, she suggested that as another method that will give us data. Seismic, which uses sound, basically you can say sound wave, seismic waves to find out what's going on below the ground. It goes much deeper, so it's lower resolution, but it'll tell us the profile of the mountainside where the bedrock is, and for that valley where the boat formation's in.
Yeah.
So that further helps us because some people claim that the boat formation itself is bedrock. So this will help disprove that. Yeah, and then also preservation. Once we get past, okay, we believe this is Noah's Ark, and we have to preserve it somehow because it's a very fragile site sitting out there.
Do you believe, like, sometimes when we do sort of episodes on, like, we did the one on the Shroud of Turin, for example, do you believe that God preserved some of these things in a way that kind of leaves a mark for humanity to see that perhaps nature could have washed this away and it could have been destroyed, but maybe there's some sort of supernatural preservation going on here, or other things that, especially that, like in the Old Testament?
Obviously this, just like other archaeological sites, some things are found by chance, or like the Dead Sea Scrolls. A kid throwing a stone into a cave,
yeah,
and then there it is, the scrolls. So like this site, the locals, in fact, I just interviewed one of the oldest locals in the village a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how this site got to their attention. And it basically had a big landslide. The soil all fell away. He said before, this whole mountainside was smooth. They used to do haying. They'd cut down the natural grass and that would create, this is their hay fields. They never fertilized out there, he said, but they'd cut down the grass. You bring a tractor out there and mow it, whatever they had back then. This is early 1900s. But he was saying though that one day they had this whole mountainside just collapse, and they noticed this one area that was not. It was so smooth, and they reported to the government, but no one thought of anything. And so again, it wasn't until people had airplanes to fly over it to take notice of it. Otherwise, if you think of the timing of everything, today, I think it'll get to the point in time where you can actually virtually excavate a site. There are archaeologists promoting that. Like they're saying in the future, you're using satellite, remote sensing, using GPR, or these type of technologies where you can peer below the soil will improve so much that you can peel away layer by layer virtually and not have to look inside. And so the timing of this is at a time where we can do some of that. And so this site that it's like any other wooden boat would have decayed away, left its mark where it was at. Same with this site. But this site, it could have gone all the way. It's in a mud flow, this earth flow. It could have been lost to time, all the way down at the bottom of the mountain. It could have been pushed down there. But it ended up right here in this narrow valley, this channel there on this west side of the mountain range there. So I do believe that God had a purpose to have it brought out to light, brought to our attention, and we have the technology now to best analyze it. So yeah, I do believe that.
Incredible.
Fascinating. I can't wait to see what comes out of this, Andrew. I think it's such a... Yeah. We were talking about this the other day, and I think what's so interesting is that, like, the further technology seems to progress and archaeology seems to progress, the more verification we have of the biblical narrative. It seems like all the time they're verifying the walls of Jericho, the location of Sodom and Gomorrah, and you continue to find that archaeology is confirming the veracity of the biblical text, and really hoping to see how this thing plays out, but hoping this actually does the same thing. It appears as if there's the compelling evidence at this point, just from what you guys have done, that this could be the location. And if it is, I mean, what an amazing time capsule for us to be able to analyze and study, and then also a piece of evidence to hold up and say, look, not only does every civilization have a flood narrative, but the biblical flood narrative, and here's the boat, right? And and I think that's just I understand why you live in Turkey and you're so excited. It gets it gets my juice going, just hearing about it.
One of the things is, I remember being a kid and being fascinated by, like, the first thing really caught my attention in reading was like the Titanic wreck, and over the years people have pieced together all these theories of like what exactly happened. Have you, after all these years of, like, do you have sort of a hypothesis of how this timeline all went down and maybe where the ship was, what happened? Have you built an narrative?
Yes.
It's a little speculative,
Yeah.
because you have to sort of, fill in the gaps. But what is sort of a breakdown where you are? What do you think happened here?
Well, so for sure the ship did land higher up on the mountainside. This is the low mountain range. The top is about, so where it's currently at, 6,500 feet. So a little over a mile high we're at here, kind of like Denver. So the top of the mountain range is maybe 2,000 meters or 2,000 feet higher at the very edge. And at the very edge is the summit there is the Iranian border with Iran. So Ron Wyatt had a theory that there's two valleys where this mud flow kind of comes down and they converge to where it's at here in this narrow channel. And so some people say it was on the eastern flow. That's where the ark originally landed, below this ridge of rock. And then now it's where it's at. And Ron thought it was up this western valley. So I went up the western valley to check it out. Now Ron claimed he had found some inscriptions up there that we could not verify. But part of that process, though, was being up there by the border, we had to get special permission. And it was interesting because we're in a military zone. You're on the Iranian border, and there's these military bases every mile or so. And the one site we're at, right where this western flow of mud starts, is a base. And so the Turkish archaeologist at the time that we were working with was able to get permission for me to be out there with her and another tourism official, and to meet with the general of the base. So him and his bodyguard went out with us once we got the written permission from the government, and they told me that this took a lot of effort because the foreigners are not allowed to be out there. And we went out there first to take photos. We got right up onto the border, barbed wire, like right across the barbed wire was Iran. And we're there and we realized, we can't study some of these stones that Ron wanted, that he had claimed he had saw inscriptions on it, because they were on the other side, and the whole area is mined. And so we said, okay, we need to get permission to fly a drone. That'd be the easiest way. Well, they get permission for me to fly a drone. And so I go up there a second trip, and in 2000, this was 21, I think we did this. We had permission, and I flew a drone into Iran to document all these border markers, and each marker, half the side is Iran, the other half of the marker is Turkey. And 4 of them I documented. And so there was a lot of pressure that day because the general said, okay, you can fly your drone. It has to be low altitude. Please do not make video of anything, and don't take wide shots of the border. Just take photographs of these objects. And he's standing beside me, and his bodyguard's there. And then we had the two officials, one archaeologist, and they're looking at my drones and my DJI, the screen, making sure I follow the rules. And the one thing I was worried about was that, okay, maybe the drone will crash in the Iran, or they'll somehow take control of it, crash it with whatever their anti-drone stuff they have. Thankfully, it didn't happen that way, but we documented these stone structure because, again, the theory was that the ark came from that one valley. Now, I was not able to prove that it came from there, and there's still more work has to be done with the mud flow itself. That Dr. Salih Barak Tuta is working on permission to actually have us photograph with the low-flying drone the whole mud flow from the border all the way down to the valley floor, so that he can reconstruct and show like what's going on. Because there's different stages of this mud flow. You can even see it in the space out, like Google Maps, like 3 or 4 different stages of this flow. And so This is still a work in progress, and so yeah, it's hard to speculate right now because it's just difficult to fully understand yet where it came from. Like I know it's higher up for sure because the boulder in the middle that you can see in the photographs, that's a boulder that came from. It's the same type of rock on the very very top. This light colored limestone sedimentary rock, and there's a huge boulder of it right sitting in the middle of the boat. And so the geologist, Dr. Byrak Chutan, he thinks, well, maybe the stone rolled into the boat shape, and then the boat shape with the stone came down to where it's at. So it's a possibility. But one thing we were trying to do this year, and it's on our list, is to get chemical analysis done of these boulders and stones in the boat that rolled in. There are other stones on the site, and then compare it to nearby. That would help us understand if it's all coming from above, or like when did some of this stuff cover the boat as it decayed. So yeah, there's things we're still working on that, and I don't know, but it came from higher up.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I think it's fascinating to go back. I think this is some of our favorite episodes. Is kind of sort of have like a spiritual lens, understanding all the narratives. It's cool that you can factor in giants and all. You probably had everything thrown at you. And same with us and the things we've heard, but it's cool that all these pieces of the puzzle are all laying around the table. And maybe this is an ancient boat site. Maybe as technology catches up to it. I mean, it's catching up to the pyramids, as we've recently been talking about. They're finding stuff underneath them. So I think this technology is going to blow the lids off, that the ancients weren't stupid, that they had this advanced technology, and that, things like the Book of Enoch say, like, they got that technology ripped off from heavenly beings, and they were building stuff, and they had things going on that the narrative that we were like monkeys and cavemen, it just doesn't really hold a lot of water, no pun intended. But it's great to go back. Tell our listeners where they can get involved. Maybe we'll have to do a Blurry trip out there.
I was thinking this the whole time, Andrew. Like I know you do tours, but you're going to Israel next year, but it'd be really fun to bring a bunch of our people up to the site.
Yeah,
do a tour.
You have to. It'll be a VIP experience. You'll get to wine and dine with the local Kurds, very friendly people, and the Turks here too. And go out there and see what we're doing. And if it's time a certain time of year where we're actually doing work, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But I'll keep you guys updated.
Okay.
But if someone wants to follow what we publicly release, what we do, then two areas. One is our website, Noah's Ark Scans, plural, noahsarkscans.com. And then you can also go to our YouTube channel, which is under my Discovered Media name. So that's Discovered, past tense, Discovered Media. And you can find that on Instagram, but yeah, and Facebook too. But we usually keep our YouTube shorts, and once in a while we'll get longer form videos. I'm catching up on things out there, but and the website is updated every couple months. But we have articles being written up by some of these scientists that we're working with, just to get some of the documentation out that's been mentioned in the media, and so they'll be published on the website. But people can contact us through the website. There's a contact page, or they can just follow us on social media.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Fun having a couple NorCal guys just hanging out here.
Yeah.
Even virtually.
It's amazing.
I know, right?
Yeah, my brother still lives there, so I'm glad I'm not in California right now.
Agreed. Same.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to hear some old Ron Wyatt stories. Wish we could interview him, but that guy was way ahead of his time. Him and Chuck Missler were just out there on the fringes of Christianity, pushing a lot of wild stuff and finding things, and long before you could easily document a lot of this stuff. So it's cool. It's fascinating. Really cool stuff.
And it's cool that you're picking up, you're carrying the torch too.
Yeah.
I mean, you had this. It's such an amazing story. So thanks for sharing with, like, just the fact that you were called Ron Wyatt back in the days on long distance, and here you are living in Turkey.
I never met Chuck.
Yeah.
But definitely used to talk to Ron a lot, and then David Fazal too. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, there's so many of these guys trying to like prove a lot of this the weirder narrative. Some of these things it's harder for modern just people to believe. Let's see, maybe that happened, maybe that didn't happen. But I think there were people always pushing a rock up a hill trying to prove no, this stuff is real. It's you have to have a different perspective and mindset, but it takes a lot pushing through a lot of adversity to prove some of these stories is legit.
Well, thanks. Hopefully we'll see you in Turkey. We got to get out. We got to get out there, Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be a
We're all
blast to come
invited.
sit. We'll have to take you up on that.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.